up for human rights. Ark Tribe is on trial in Adelaide today, facing 6 months imprisonment just for standing up and having a health and safety meeting on a building site. 200 years ago, Britain used to deport trade unionists to Australia. Today, Australia is jailing trade unionists for standing up for trade union rights, standing up for workers' rights. The trial is in Adelaide today. We are saying, don't jail trade unionists. Don't send Ark Tribe to jail. Trade union rights are human rights.
Standing up for health and safety rights in construction.
Down at Australia House today because in Adelaide today there's a building worker called Ark Tribe who's on trial for holding a health and safety meeting on a building site. What he did is a union member. He held a union meeting on health and safety. After the meeting, the law in Australia now is that he has to supply the names and addresses of all the workers who attended the meeting to the state and also to the employers. The unions have said this is a massive infringement of human rights. They've refused to hand over the names of any worker that just happens to turn up to go on a union safety meeting, and because of that, Ark Tribe is on trial in Adelaide today, and if he gets found guilty, he could be 6 months in jail for basically being a health and safety campaigner.
So the Australian government's made a law which jails trade unionists for freely associating. That would be one, against their right to free association and against their right to organise as a trade union.
All of the Australian building workers unions, all of them have come together to campaign against this new organisation that's been set up in Australia called the Australian Building and Construction Commissionaires. And basically they've been given rights to go around and rip up the old terms and conditions that was taking place in the industry and implement things that no other worker in Australia, or as far as we can see anywhere in the world, are under these restrictions. Effectively, if the union or any groups of workers want to have any meeting about health and safety, they have to provide the names and addresses of everyone who attended to the employer and to the state. Now we think that's really open to blacklisting and victimisation afterwards, and rather than that, exactly, trade union rights are a human right. We think we're standing up for human rights, and if 200 years ago British courts sent trade unionists to prison or exiled trade unionists to Australia, and today in 2010 Australian courts are sending trade unionists to jail for standing up for workers' rights.
Don't jail Ark!
Thanks very much.
Don't jail Ark! 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 Don't jail.
My name's Daniel Blackburn. I'm the director of the International Centre for Trade Union Rights, an organisation that has a big following of lawyers, trade unionists, academics here in the UK, around the world, and particularly in Australia as well.
And the international trade union movement is membership and participation in trade unions is enshrined in human rights as well.
Absolutely. The right to form and join trade unions for the protection of workers' interests is protected by international law. It's a fundamental human right.
And are you aware throughout history of governments that have arrested trade unionists? Could you give us some examples of governments in history that have used that as a method of controlling trade unions?
Yeah, well, governments that arrest and detain trade unionists are among the most serious human rights violators in the world. The arrest of a trade unionist for taking part in trade union activities is an extremely serious violation of international law, and it is regarded as such by the International Labour Organization. Our being here today is to make that point and to help raise awareness of how serious a violation we believe this to be.
Yes. And I understand in the case of Ark, you merely organised a trade union meeting and refused to tell the government the names of people that attended, which he may not have known either.
Yeah, as far as we're concerned, the point would be that he's engaging in trade union activities that are protected by international law, and the use of the criminal law to repress those activities is entirely inappropriate. The technicalities of the Australian legislation are a matter for the Australian government to determine, but however they choose to design this legislation, it must comply with fundamental human rights.